What's going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, a business podcast for business people. And today I'm getting to share the highlight with a new friend of mine, Kenny Spitler, the president of MedFocus. Kenny, did I get the intro right, man? I got to know.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Chandler.
No, thank you for joining me today. I know you and I have met at a local networking thing here in the Nashville area called Truth in Business, and that's how we became sort of friends, and we bonded over this very special, amazing pork chop from this steakhouse called Perry's. It's a chain, so you can get them anywhere. I think they got a few locations around the country. I would recommend trying the pork chop and then meeting new friends over this. I mean, that thing has to weigh a pound, right? Maybe 2 pounds. It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Oh my gosh. Well, I would love, you and I got to talk for about an hour the last time we were together, and that's sort of why I knew I had to have you on the show. But, you know, all the listeners out there don't know you at all, and I'd love for you to just take 30 seconds to give sort of a brief overview of your career and how you got to MedFocus, and then I'd love to dive in and talk through some of your entrepreneurial journey, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm 37 years now in the healthcare arena. Been involved with, started off in sales to sales management to entrepreneurship to, but probably 20 years really focused on the device side of the business, spending all of my days in the ORs with physicians. And about 17 years ago, I started doing facility development of developing ambulatory surgery centers and specialty hospitals. And I did that corporate as a chief development officer and a development officer and a senior vice president of development for 3 different management companies. And then I went out on my own about 6.5 years ago, where MedFocus was launched, and I've been doing consulting in that space ever since. But of course, it's expanded somewhat because, sometimes a physician wants his practice sold, so I help him with that. Sometimes he wants to, he needs his building sold, so I help him with that. Sometimes they want to acquire things, so it's kind of nice to, you're not really locked into a box when you have your own company, and you can do anything that you're qualified to do. So it's a joy to be able to have, not just be single focused, if you will.
And that the reason we all become entrepreneurs, right, is for a little bit of freedom. What's the old saying? You work 80 hours a week or 100 hours a week, so you don't have to work 40 hours for somebody else, and then you can kind of go and express your creativity, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Talk about the first business you got into a little bit. Like, how did you do it? Were you an entrepreneur before when you were a kid, maybe? Like, what made you want to start that first business, and tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, actually, my first entrepreneurial gig was probably when I was about 10 years old. For some reason, I had a knack, all of us kids have bicycles, and so we rode everywhere on bikes. And for some reason, I had a knack for being able to fix my bike, and, the brakes would go out, or tires or chains or whatever. And so there was a neighbor that had a little shed, and they had tools. And so I would have a little shop where I would fix all the neighborhood kids' bicycles. And, at the time, I don't even remember if I got paid any money, but, somebody would bring cookies, or somebody would it was truly a barter system. And so that was kind of my first taste of being able, and I liked being able to satisfy my friends with a good repair. So, you kind of got that immediate gratification, and of course it didn't hurt in the neighborhood to get to know some of the cute girls that needed their bikes repaired and stuff like that too. So that was kind of my first adventure at 10. And then I would say by the time I was probably 13, I was able to use my dad's push mower, and I was able to convince them to be able to drop me off at different people's houses, pick me up in the truck dropped the mower off, and then I mowed lawns. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had an entrepreneur spirit from a very early age. I mean, I'm not counting, of course, the lemonade stands and stuff like that, but yeah. So I've always had a desire to do a lot, quite frankly. And as an entrepreneur, as a young guy, it was kind of fun. I started working, like seriously when I was 11 years old. I got I've got a really cool story about that if you'd like me to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, when I was 11 years
lights
old,
on around here.
yeah, I got you. Well, when I was 11 years old, my father was career Army. And so as you can see back here, the flag, that was my late father's flag. So he was career Army. He was a master sergeant, and he was a tough guy. And so one day I got home from school, and my dad said, "Hey, we're going to go to the mall and get you some tennis shoes." And I looked at him very strange because my father and I had never gone to any store to buy anything other than the grocery store. Okay. I mean, we got to the grocery store buying food, but my mom was always the one that took me shopping.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad takes me down to the store, and I'm going to date myself when I tell this story, but we walk into the store where you can buy tennis shoes, and there was 2 different brands of tennis shoes to choose from. Not like today where you got 100 or whatever.
A whole 2, huh? Wow.
A whole 2. You had the plain white Keds that were, Keds. They were the cheap ones. They would cost $8 a pair at the time. And this was in 1973. There was another set next to them that had in black and red and white and blue, and they were low-top Chuck Taylors. So the original Converse Chuck Taylor low tops.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I wanted the Chuck Taylors. I didn't want the Keds. And I wasn't skilled at the time to be able to make a good presentation. So my father said, "Well, we're going to get these shoes. These are $8. Those are 12. Those are much more expensive." And I go, "Dad," I said, "you don't understand. All the kids are wearing these shoes." Well, you can imagine his response. "Well, if all the kids jumped off the bridge, would you jump?" And I go, "No, I'm not stupid. I wouldn't jump off the bridge if other people were jumping off the bridge." And
I think
he looked
learned
at
that
me.
in basic training.
Yeah, probably so. And he looked at me and he says, "Well, I don't care what the other kids want." And, I could have come up with, "Look, the rubber's so much greater. It lasts 3 times longer." I didn't have a presentation ready. I was just kind of caught off guard. And so he said, "Well, we're going to get these $8 shoes." And I said, "You know what? Don't waste your money because I won't wear them." And my dad looked at me like, "What in the heck's wrong with you, kid?" Probably. And this is exactly what he said. He said, "Kid, if you want those shoes, the $12 shoes, I guess you can get yourself a damn job." Exactly what he said. And I was like, okay. And so we leave the mall. I get back in the truck with Dad. We drive home. We don't speak a single word to each other when we get there. So we get home. I had no shoes. My mom's probably scratching her head thinking, this is interesting. Well, so the next day I rode my bike to school every day. Well, the next day I rode my bike down the country roads to get to school. And on the way back, I decided to ride down the main roads to get back home. And I noticed as I was riding my bicycle down the road, there was a little Mexican restaurant on the side of the road, and it had a sign in the window that said "Help Wanted." Well, I stopped in there. Remember, I was 11 years old. So I stop in there, push my bike over, and I go in, and I said, "I want to talk to the manager." And this guy comes out, and he says, "Yes, how can I help you?" I said, "Well, I saw there was a Help Wanted sign out there, and I want the job." And he says, "Kid, how old are you?" That's the first thing he said. And I said, 11. He goes, "Well, first of all, in the state of Missouri," and that's where I was raised, he said, "in the state of Missouri, you can't work until you're 12 unless you have a release signed by your parents." And I said, "Okay, I think I can get that done. But anyway, let's talk about this job." And he said, "Well, it's a bus boy. Do you know what that is?" I said, "No. What is that?" And he goes, well, that's where you take this gray tray, this bucket, and you go and you clean off the table and put all the stuff in there. Then you clean the table down, put everything back where it belongs, and you go back to the kitchen, you drop it off. We might have you help us in the kitchen and clean stuff or whatever. That's the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, I can do that easily. I'm an only child and I'm required to clean the kitchen at home. And, that sounds like something I could really do. I'm qualified to
I don't
do.
get paid when I do it at home.
I don't get paid. I could do this. So the guy said, kid, if you can get this thing signed and bring it back to me, I'll give you the job. So I get the paperwork. I get on my bike. I ride home. And my dad was there. And I said, Dad, I need you to sign this. And he looks at me like, what is this? You in trouble in school again or something, And I said, no. I said, you told me yesterday that if I'm one of those shoes, I need to get myself a job. I never really thought about getting a job, but then you gave me the idea. So on the way home, I shared the story about the restaurant, but you got to sign this or I can't work. So my dad's jaw dropped. He just was like, because he was just mouthing off, right?
Yeah.
And so he signed it.
He's got to be shocked sitting there. That's so funny.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall between the conversation for he and Mom, but I bet he didn't get a kiss for a long time. And so he signed it. So the next day, I go back to school, go into the place on the way back. I handed the guy the paper. It was signed. He says, "Okay, when can you start?" I can say, "I can start now."
Right now.
And so I literally
what did it
went
pay an hour?
Oh man, back then it was like $3.35 an hour or something like that. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
Minimum wage,
Right.
And so I ended up working, and I worked as many hours as I could. I got my first paycheck, which was more than the $12 that I needed for my Chuck Taylors. I went down to that store and I bought a red pair of Chuck Taylor tennis shoes. And ironically, I still have a pair today. I kind of try to always keep them just as a reminder. And so I learned a very valuable lesson that if you really want something and you're dependent on somebody else to provide it for you, then you're going to have to take what they give you. But if you go out and work it and work and earn money, then you can get what you want. And so that started I was so happy I accomplished the goal. I got my shoes, it was like unbelievable. And I was like, wow, this is how it works. So I started working and never quit working yet to this day. I bought 2 cars before I turned 16. And you couldn't even drive them until you're 16 legally. It kind of started my pathway of going, okay.
Wait, what did you do to buy the cars?
What's that?
What did you do to buy the cars? Just jobs?
Well, I ended up, then I had a better job. I got a job in working for a company called DeKalb. And what our job was to detassel corn. So there was a lot of, I lived in farm country and we had a lot of feed corn, and you have to take the tassels off in between every 8 rows to stop the pollens from, crossing over. And that's what makes the feed corn. And so I was getting paid, I remember distinctly then, I was getting paid $5.65 an hour, which was a lot back then. And then I got paid time and a half for overtime, and I got paid double time for holidays. So I would just work all the time, 7 days a week.
Yeah. And
at the end of the summer, I'd have $3,000 or $4,000, just as a kid. And so I bought my first car for $200 from a neighbor. It was an old Impala, 1972 Impala with a 454 barrel, and had play in the steering wheel like turning a boat. I mean, it was horrible. So I ended up trading that one in and got another car that actually had air conditioning. That was the biggest thing. I just want air conditioning because the other one didn't have air conditioning. Yeah, and so I ended up with 2 cars before I was 16.
Oh my gosh, I think that's amazing. What I'm hearing there is the power of hard work. What role do you think hard work plays in your, damn near 40 years of career success at this point? And being an entrepreneur is difficult, and I would imagine that hard work has to play a pretty significant role. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, no question. Having a good hard work ethic, being able to work hard, roll your sleeves up, and be determined to get things done is critical. But I think what's more critical is working smart, knowing
Mm-hmm.
how to work, because realistically, you can work very, very hard and have a shovel in your hand and go dig a hole, and you can be digging holes every day, and it's a really hard job, and it's a lot of hard work, and I respect those people that do that work. But at the end of the day, you dig holes and you go dig another hole. There's not a lot of reward there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned that along the way, to not just work hard, but to work smart. So if you put that combination of being strategic, having a plan, and following your plan with good work ethic, it's a winning combination.
No, I love that. So when you started your first company as an adult,
hmm
how much strategic planning did you put into it, or were you just kind of like, I'm going for it, and then you just sort of figured it out as you
Well,
went?
the first company I started as an adult was a company called Summit Medical Specialties, and that was in 1991. And the way that occurred is I was working with another company and I was selling this very unique product for gastroenterology. And the product was for doing biopsies of tissue. And still yet to this day, I wish I could find that company that owned that patent, but still yet to this day, people go in through the scope, they grab a piece of tissue, they pull it out, they put it in a specimen jar, then they go back in and they go in and out and in and out and in and out. If you don't have that instrument exactly closed, it can rip the channel internally. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of our advantages of this particular product, you'd put it down the channel one time, it worked off a suction, and it would suck a perfect piece of mucosa tissue in, and it had this little guillotine thing. So you'd pull from the outside of the scope, you just pull it, and it cut a perfect sample, and then it had suction that was manual, and you'd put your thumb over the suction and it would suck that sample up and put it into a little container. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
And so part of my discovery process was to ask, what are you spending on repairs
Mm-hmm.
on your instrument, your scopes, your flexible scopes, in order to go up and down the channel? And I was at University of Florida Shands Teaching Hospital at the time. I lived in Jacksonville, and I was shocked when they told me that they spent. I mean, I was thinking it was like $38,000 every year on repairing these scopes, and I went, "What?" So a light bulb went off in my head. Then I went down to the OR, talked to them. How much money are you spending on repairing instruments and blah, blah, blah. And I started going around talking to different people, and I found out that they were all spending a large amount of monies to get their stuff repaired. And the only place anybody was sending their stuff was to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer is kind of like taking your car to the dealership, right?
Yeah.
You want to pay the highest price, take your car to the dealership. You find
Mm-hmm.
a secondary, independent mechanic, and he can do the same repair, same parts, and cost you a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
So the light went off in my head, and I went, aha, there's an opportunity here. So I got very strategic, and I started contacting people that may have experience with being able to repair these things.
Mm-hmm.
I found out about this man that used to be a master technician he's in Texas, that opened up his own business, and he was master for Olympus, and he opened up his own shop. So I contacted him and said, hey, is there any way that you could do repair work for me? Through my company, I'll pay you to do the repair. I'll overnight the stuff to you, repair it. You tell me what it's going to cost. And then, I'll tell my clients, I'll upcharge it and tell my clients and see how it works. And so he said, yeah, it's great, but you got to come down for training. I said, okay. So I went to the Woodlands in Texas and had the training. And while I was there, there was another fellow that I met from Colorado that had the same idea and vision that I did. The only difference is he was a year ahead of me. So he had already identified people that could do instrumentation repair, people that could do rigid scope repair, people that could do camera repairs, the whole nine yards. So I said, hey, his name was Rick Parks, really great guy. So I said, Rick, I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'm in Florida. You're in Colorado. I said, what's your plans to do with your company? He goes, all I want to do is service my Colorado area. I just want to go to stay in my area and service my market. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to want to expand mine. I'll just tell you right now, I'm going to want to have reps all over the country, but I'll make an agreement with you. I will never have a rep in Colorado or any state surrounding that you service if you will help me get connected with these people and help me get this thing launched. And so we came to an agreement, and I ended up him helping me, and I'd help him as we kept learning things together as we grew. And I lived up to my word, and I never entered the state of Colorado or the surrounding states. Had reps in other places, and built that company. And then started then I had instrumentation line that I had out of Germany. Another contacts that I had through Germany to get stuff private labeled for me. And so that was kind of the launch of a company. And I remember it was kind of nervous at first because I went to my wife and I said, Cindy, I said, listen, I really got this idea of starting this company. And I think it's a great idea. I think I can be very successful at this, but I have no guarantees. And so I need your support in order for me to do this. And she goes, well, what do we, what's the risk? I said, well, we could lose our house. We could lose, we were a young couple with a house. And I said, we could lose our house. We could lose whatever we got. I mean, that's the risk. And she says, I believe in you. I know you can do it. So yeah, I think, I support it. And so for the first couple months, it was a little tight, but then I got business rolling and never looked back until I sold the company to the employees about five and a half years later.
That's amazing. I'm trying to remember, did you have a business partner at one point in one of these ventures from our conversation?
Do I have a business partner now?
Well, I don't know about now, but like it just at some point, and if now, that's fine. It's still a good question. I just wanted to get your thoughts on business partnerships and what you think makes them work or not work.
Well, I at Summit Medical, I had no business partner. But as soon as I sold that company, I moved here to Nashville and started another company with another gentleman who will be left unnamed. And it turned out to be horrible. Okay. He had expertise that I didn't, and we were opening up basically a diagnostic clinic. And he had expertise in billing and coding, collecting that I didn't. I had the operational and business development side covered. Mm-hmm. And it was a really bad partnership to the point where he claimed bankruptcy, left me holding the bag for the whole company, made a bunch of mistakes in billing and coding. It was just it's one of those stories that you don't even want to recount. But it was a great learning lesson in life, but the partnership was horrible. So I had my very first partnership that I ever had, I had a very negative viewpoint. And so I was kind of determined that, I had this whole thing went belly up. I lost a whole bunch of money. Everything that I'd made for selling Summit, I'd lost it all. And I had to kind of start over. And so I've had to take, I started as an independent and became owned a distributorship for Richard Wolf Medical, which was a German company. And so, my impression of having a partner was really bad because I had a bad partnership, and it developed a lone wolf mentality. Hey, if I'm going to do it, I got to do it right. I got to do it on my own, which was also a mistake, because you can only get so far doing stuff on your own, and it creates a unhealthy viewpoint of people not being able to trust them, right? Yeah. And so over the years, I eventually learned to have, nice partnerships, collaborations, if you will. I've still never really had a 50-50 partner, if you will. I've entered into other, joint ventures and stuff with people as minority partners, but I've never let anybody have enough
you still got the
control over the business to screw it up so badly that I couldn't recover, So I think partnerships are valuable. I think collaboration is valuable. But I think the biggest lesson that I learned is that there's two different levels of trust.
Mhm.
Most people make a decision on who they're going to partner with and who they're going to, do life with based on people that they trust their character. So they're not going to steal from you. They're not going to lie. They're not going to, they're not going to do bad things. They're of good character. The problem is that often we make choices based off of people's character, which is good. We trust their character, but we forget about really identifying their competency. And so if you're not competent, then you can't trust their competency. And this happens, I see all the time in business, where people will take somebody that they trust and they're doing one role, and then there's a bigger role that comes up and a bigger responsibility, something that really is needing more skills on a competency level than that person has.
Yeah.
And they can't get the job done. So they put them on the seat in the bus and they offer them more money, and this is going to be a great opportunity. And they set them up for failure, not on purpose, but they do it because they didn't really identify the competency.
Yeah.
And so I find that you got to be very careful, not only just to trust the character, but you better know they're competent. For me, Chandler, if you hurt your knee and you need your knee to be operated on, you don't want me operating on your knee. Okay. I'm not a doctor. I'm not competent and qualified to do that. Okay.
Even though I trust you.
You can trust me. I'm not going to steal from you. I'm not going to, I'm not going to cause you any harm, but I'm not competent to operate on your knee. So I think it's really important that people understand that trust has to go beyond just the character and has to go to the competency. And I learned that lesson, the hard way, but it's a very valuable lesson. So now I partner with people. Of course, I'm always looking for character, right? I don't want to do business with characters. I want to do business with people with character. Okay.
Yeah. I like
but I want to do business with people that are competent, that can actually, get it done.
No, that's good. I hear that a lot from a character basis. Like, people talk about having a partner that has high character, and obviously that's important. And I think it's the thing that people sort of intuitively know that they need. But I don't think a lot of times from a business partner standpoint, we think about the competency piece of it, because you are doing something probably pretty hard. And if you're going to give away equity, which is really expensive, you can find a lot of people in your life that have high character that you trust, but you really got to find somebody, like you said, that knows what they're doing within that space to actually bring real business value from day one. I'll tell you, you met Austin, and he's one of my two partners that I have. We have a third partner we just brought on officially at the beginning of January, and those guys know things about marketing that I can never touch. And jokes on them, because I know nothing that they don't already know, and so I get to tag along for the ride. So it's fun, but no, they're high trust, high character guys that I would do. I'd trust with my family or my money or any of that stuff, and then also they're pretty freaking good at what they do from a paid ad standpoint. If they weren't good at paid ads and they were just trying to figure it out as we went, we would have to lower our bar for customers we were trying to sell to, which would just hurt the business and make getting to a successful level or growing or hiring more people or doing whatever you open a business to do, it would take so much longer. So I love the adding of the second piece there with the competency. Is there anything else you would look for when you're thinking about partnering with people, even if it isn't a minority role beyond competency or character?
Well, whether you're collaborating or partnering, through a contractual basis, or not even having them as partners in your business from an equity standpoint. I think certainly the character, the competency, and then the temperament. Okay. Because in all business, you face challenges at different times that you didn't anticipate. And I think you've certainly heard it say that the true character of a person comes when they're under pressure. And the unfortunate part is it's really hard to gauge that until you're in the pressure cooker. You just don't know. And so sometimes you don't want somebody going off on the handle resorting to anger, or resorting to manipulation, or resorting to some other
Mm-hmm.
negative ways to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, you can't see that until you're under pressure. And so you've
Mm-hmm.
got to be very cognizant that that's a potential issue. And you got to be thinking about, if this happens, then how do I handle it? And
Mm-hmm.
there are always teaching moments, unless somebody, blows something up in the middle of a meeting, which typically, doesn't happen. Usually people are professional enough to hold their tongue in those settings. But
Mm-hmm.
then, they'll fall apart afterwards. Oh my gosh, this is going to go, oh, it's never going to work, or negative, negative, negative. And I'm not too keen on negativity. I've always been the kind of guy that if somebody says you got a problem, don't come to me and just sit down and talk to me about the problem. Tell me, I don't mind talking about the problem, but come and tell me what you think your solution is to the problem. And then we've got something to work with. If it's strictly problems, yeah, we've got a society of people that complain, right? I don't need
Mm-hmm.
complainers, but I don't mind discussing problems. Just let's talk about what the solutions are. How can we
Yeah.
overcome it? How can we address it?
I don't remember the name of the study. I'll have to go find it. But there was a study that came out that said, and they studied people for over like 20 years or something like that, spent a ton of money on it. Maybe it was Penn. Anyways, they did this study and they found that pretty much the key to differentiating whether or not you had a quote unquote successful life or a unsuccessful one was where you rated on the optimistic versus pessimistic scale. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're more optimistic about the future, you'll keep looking for new ways to do things. You'll keep trying. You'll forgive people. You'll keep moving forward. You're just lighter. And you just open yourself up to so many more options, which then opens you up to bigger options and then bigger options. And then, as you know, a compounding effect over 40 years. And all of a sudden you're sitting around going, I've had a pretty good career to this point and I'm still going. I still got some gas in the tank. So optimism, I'm with you, is a huge thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you this. I could talk to you for the next 4 hours because you and I just have that sort of DNA in us. But I'd love to ask you one more question if you've got time.
Sure, sure.
Um, if you could go back in time after this 40-year run you've had so far and tell a new entrepreneur, or maybe even tell yourself as an entrepreneur, like what one lesson or one thing or maybe a couple things would you wish you would have known then that you know now that you operate with on a daily basis?
Well, I think probably probably the most important thing is to have a plan, and have as much of a strategic and developed game plan as you possibly can, knowing that you're going to have to be adaptable because things don't always work out the way you think they will. But I think there was a lot of times where I just said, "Hey, this is a great idea. I'm just going to go for it." Like my conversation with my wife, and I didn't really have a plan. And my plan was just go out and start working and pitching the deal and see what happens. Well, it all worked out fortunately because I had already established relationships with a lot of the hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was able to get in the door real quickly. But I think if I would have had, and I was doing the shotgun approach, I was like, well, where are you going to put reps? I don't care, wherever I have one that can bring business. And so there was some logistical things like, I had reps in California, and I was based in Florida. Well, I had to ship stuff all the way across the country,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was more expensive for me to do business in Colorado than it was locally because my shipping costs, logistics and things. So
Mm-hmm.
I would just say, do the best job you can developing your business plan and taking a long-term look and being strategic as possible, and don't just rely on your ability to shoot from the hip. So I did a lot of that, but then I learned as the years go by to develop plans and be very strategic. And everybody's heard the old saying, if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. Well, I had a plan, but the more, I think, not just if you have a plan, you plan to fail. The more detailed your plan is, the more detailed your planning success. And so that would be my advice to young entrepreneurs. You got a lot of vim and a lot of vigor and a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of ideas, and you're just ready to prove that you can make a difference in the world. And those are
Mm-hmm.
all great, great qualities. But stop just a moment and put the time into planning, into visualizing and where you want to go, and then go out and do it. And I think that's probably the biggest advice I can give anyone is, slow down, because entrepreneurs, we all want to go fast. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's go do this. That's awesome. Let's pursue this. And entrepreneurs are wired that way, right? We're risk takers. We want to, and we get, bright, shiny objects excite us. Oh, that's a nice, bright, shiny thing. Let's try that. But I think if you take your time to have a more of a strategic plan, it'll stop you from rushing into things. There was many times I rushed into things without doing my proper due diligence, without having a good strategic plan, and they didn't work out. Mm-hmm. And I could have been using that time for something else. And that's one thing you learn when you've been in business as long as I have. The most valuable thing you have is time. And you don't realize that when you're young. You waste a lot of time learning and figuring things out. So the more that you can, plan your time, and the more strategy you have, the better off you'll be. And it'll stop you from going down rabbit holes and chasing after all the bright, shiny objects that turn into nothing. And, I've been there, raised my hand. I've lived it. But I don't operate that way anymore. Exactly.
Well, I feel like you're kind of reading my mail here, and that's about as good a word as I could end this thing on as possible. And it's a good reminder for me, because I'll be honest with you, to be vulnerable, I love some shiny objects. There's always new things on the horizon, and me and my partners, we were messing around last week talking about buying a stake in a hot sauce company because we thought we could run pretty good Amazon ads for it. And then we went down this hour-and-a-half rabbit hole talking about it. So we didn't do anything. So I will say we at least slowed down enough to know not to actually go engage with it, but we are some suckers for some shiny objects sometimes. But I do think it's fun to scratch that itch and just plan. But yeah, it's committing to it and actually going and putting dollars into it. Not a great idea right now, but that's amazing. Kenny, thank you so much for joining us on the show, man. This was so helpful, and 40 years of wisdom distilled into 30 minutes. We got to have you back on and do another part 2. I got more questions to ask in the future.
Well, I'll be more than happy to, Chandler, anytime. If I could be helpful to this generation and to the new generation, anything I can do to give back, I'm happy to. There's plenty of people that supported me and helped me to learn. And so if I can give it back anyway, I'm more than happy to do so.
I love that. Well, we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate everybody out there that's listening. We'll see you next week.